Okay. Chairman Lyons, we're ready.
I'd like to call to order the meeting of June the 14th, 2021 Board of Supervisors to order. Randy, we take roll, please.
Supervisor Day.
Here.
Supervisor Ayers. Here. Supervisor McDaniel.
Here.
And Chairman Lyons.
Here. At this time, Ms. Ayers is going to lead us in an invocation followed by the pledge. Please stand if you care to join us.
Let us pray that tonight we will be of service to our constituents by carefully listening to each and every voice among us with respect, patience, and the sincere desire to act for the common good of our citizens. Grant us the wisdom to govern amid conflicting interests and the ability to work together in harmony, even when there is honest disagreement. God, thank you for the ability to be involved in good and useful work and the honor of bearing these responsibilities.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While the room will be open to the public due to the size of the meeting room and social distancing requirements, no more than 30 attendees other than county staff will be allowed into the room at one time. For the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia Executive Order 72, persons who have been fully vaccinated for the COVID-19 virus are not required to wear a mask. We will hold citizen comments near the beginning of the meeting. We'll do our best to take citizens' comments remotely. There are two options for citizens to offer comment. To join by telephone, you may dial in one of the numbers listed on the county website. Webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can do so on the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors YouTube channel, also available on the county website. If you wish to make a citizen comment as a Zoom meeting participant, you will use the raise your hand feature. You can press the raise your hand button on the bottom of your Zoom window or press *9 if you're calling in by telephone. At this time, I ask, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, I would like to add a resolution declaring July 2021 to be plastic pollution reduction.
Okay, we have a motion for a change. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second. Any discussion? Ms. Ayers? We're voting, yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yeah.
And the chair votes yes. At this time, we'll have a motion to approve the agenda with the change.
I make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. At this time, I'll ask Ms. Ayers to read aloud the resolution declaring July 2021 to be Plastic Pollution Reduction Month.
Whereas single-use plastic pollution is one of the primary environmental threats to the well-being of people and wildlife everywhere, and whereas reducing the use of plastic is important because plastic production requires an enormous amount of energy and resources, which in turn causes carbon emissions and contributes to global warming. And whereas reducing the use of plastics is important because plastics are discarded into the environment where toxic chemicals linked to cancers, birth defects, impaired immunity, and endocrine dysfunction leach into the water supply and food chain, harming humans and wildlife. And whereas reducing the use of plastics is important because plastics are discarded into the environment where they can be ingested by wildlife and kill, for example, at least 100,000 marine mammals and 1 million seabirds every year, according to the United Nations. And whereas reducing the use of plastics is important because plastics are discarded into the environment where they create unsightly pollution that spoils roadways, parks, neighborhoods, and other areas inhabited by humans. And whereas dramatically more single-use plastics are being generated in the United States than in prior decades, with, for instance, the United States Environmental Protection Agency reporting that 35,680,000 tons of plastic were generated in the United States in 2018 compared to just 390 tons in 1960. And whereas only a fraction of the plastics produced and discarded in the United States recycled, with, for instance, the EPA reporting that only 8.7% of the plastics generated in the United States in 2018 were recycled, while 75.6% were landfilled that year. And whereas communities worldwide are promoting campaigns to encourage their residents to choose to refuse single-use plastics, and whereas Plastic Free July is a global movement aimed at empowering people, businesses, and entire communities to shift away from single-use plastics in their lives. And whereas July 2021 will be the 10th International Plastic Free July worldwide, and whereas the Virginia state government has committed to reducing plastic pollution with the General Assembly establishing a Plastic Waste Prevention Advisory Council in 2020, and the governor signing Executive Order 77 on March 23rd, 2021, which mandates the phasing out of single-use plastics by Virginia state government agencies, including disposable plastic bags, single-use plastic, and polystyrene food service containers, plastic straws and cutlery, and single-use plastic water bottles. And whereas numerous local organizations, including Rockbridge Area Conservation Council, Mainstream Lexington, Boxwood, 50 Ways Rockbridge, North Rockbridge Women's Club, Rockbridge Area Masters Gardeners, Rockbridge Community Health Foundation, and the Blue Ridge Garden Club are combining efforts to launch a Choose to Refuse to Use Single-Use Plastics campaign in July of 2021, aimed at encouraging the residents and businesses of Rockbridge County and the cities of Lexington and Buena Vista to reduce their consumption of single-use plastics. And whereas single-use plastic consumption can be reduced in a myriad ways, including avoiding selling and purchasing consumer goods in plastic packaging, buying in bulk and refilling usable containers, declining plastic straws, using compostable takeout containers, and using reusable storage containers, covers on leftover shopping bags and water bottles. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors, by this resolution, formally declares July 2021 as Plastic Pollution Reduction Month. Adoption of this resolution demonstrates support for the Choose to Refuse to Use Single-Use Plastics campaign. Be it further resolved that the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors encourages the business operating within county limits to take all available steps to reduce consumption of single-use plastics in order to preserve and improve the environment and well-being of all. Adopted this 14th day of June, 2021, Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. You've heard the resolution. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make that motion.
A motion. Do we have a second? And a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day? Mr. McDaniel?
Yeah.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. At this time, we will welcome citizens' comments. To make a comment, please follow these guidelines. Sign up to speak on the citizen comments sign-up sheet. Once your name is called, address the board from the podium, beginning by clearly stating your name and magisterial district. Please do not expect the board to respond to questions or engage in a dialogue. If you have questions, please ensure that you have entered your contact information on the citizen comment sign-up sheet, and the staff will do their best to respond to your questions as soon as possible. Citizens are respectfully requested to keep comments brief, not to speak for more than 3 minutes. There's a timer located on the podium for your convenience. When the light turns from green to yellow, you have 30 seconds remaining. Once the timer sets off an alert, please return to your seat if attending in person, or simply end your comment if attending virtually. The same rules apply for those attending virtually. Once your name is called, please state your full name, magisterial district, and contact information for the record. So we'll now open the public comment section of the meeting. Mr. Bolster.
So there's one individual signed up for citizen comment. It's Colette Berry Reck from the city of Lexington, and the topic is time limits.
Okay, so I'm Colette Berry Reck, and I live in Lexington. And I actually would love to talk with you for my 2 minutes and 48 seconds about this period of time, the citizens' comments. I would love that you all would brainstorm and consider opening it up so it's a little bit more inclusive inclusive might not be the right word, but friendly, so that we can get a feeling more of what Leslie said in her prayer, that we're working in harmony. It feels very strange that I'm over here and you're over there, and I can't ask you a question, you can't ask me a question, but there's this kind of a feeling of a wall between us. And I don't think it's conducive to community engagement. I have been, see, I'm watching. Actually, I thought I was only going to have 2 minutes, so I had 3 minutes. It's like, whoa. I have seen people come into these meetings and they're concerned citizens. They have papers, 2, 3, 4 papers worth of notes that they want to read and share with you, ideas and thoughts. And, you know, these are, I don't know everybody who's done this, but a lot of them are really caring, responsible people, and they want to say what they want to say. But when they have to watch the clock and it's 3 minutes, what happens is their words come out like those jackhammers, okay, that the guys work on the streets, God bless them. And so the whole feeling of the communication is very, it's not rich, it's not back and forth, it's not, you know, we're working together. It's, I'm quickly trying to say what I'm concerned about, and you're listening, and then boom, the door is shut. And I really wish, you know, maybe you all could take citizen comments, you know, once a month, and then extend it, make it a little longer, 5 minutes, make it so that, you know, you could ask us a question, we could ask you a question. So there's a little bit of dialogue to promote a feeling of working together. That's what I would wish for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolster, is anyone else signed up? Is there anyone remote on Zoom that have raised a hand or called in?
So no one's raised their hand.
Okay, we will close the public comment section of the meeting and move on. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review the minutes from our May 24th, 2021 meeting. If so, and if there's no changes proposed, I'll entertain a motion to approve. So moved. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Move on to the county financial package. Mr. Bolster?
Good evening, Chairman of the board and members of the board. If you go to your financial package on board docs, you'll see that there's a letter, a memorandum that highlights the activities of the Commissioner of the Revenue and for the Treasurer and for the Fiscal Services Department. So I'll just go ahead and read through from our Commissioner, from Mr. Weitzel. They just wrapped up first half real estate. Those were due on June 7th. He continues his monthly activities, which is reconciling the business personal property reports that he gets from the DMV and also from Virginia DGIF. He's also preparing for the personal property tax rolls that go out in the fall. And he's working on his delinquent 2021 business license report. And we'll be sending out letters to those that are delinquent. He's also assisting Wingate, the firm that was selected to do the general reassessment over the next approximately year and a half. And then he's also working on the audits of the Schedule Cs that come into their office. If there's no questions for Mr. Weitzel, I'll just go ahead and transition to Ms. Travato's report to the board. In a similar fashion, they just got done completing real estate taxes. Those are ongoing. Again, they were due on June 7th. She indicates that there was quite a bit of activity over the last week or so. She will send out delinquent real estate letters to those that it's applicable to once they receive all the mail that has come in for payments on real estate. She also wanted to mention that she continues to work with the state on debt set-off, And so that's funding that will come down to the locality for those that were due a refund. So there's 104 filings and about $13,019 will come back to the county should those be approved. We also have the external auditors coming this week for a couple days. And then she just wanted to mention that county decals are due at the end of this month, so June 30th. With that, if there's no questions for her, I'll go ahead and transition to the ARPA funding. And so right now we've collected $2,192,270 from the U.S. Treasury that came in on June 2nd. The other 50% that will come in will be a year later. So we are anticipating $4,384,541 coming in from the feds through the Treasury over the next 12 months. There's 5 general categories. They're fairly broad: support of public health, addressing negative economic impacts to the locality, replacing public sector revenue losses that have been occurred, premium pay for essential workers, and then water, sewer, and broadband infrastructures. The key thing about those broad categories is that every expenditure needs to be linked up, that it's in response to the public health pandemic that occurred with COVID-19 and continues. We have some key dates that are out there. So the first one is that the money needs to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, but it can be obligated and then expended through December 31st, 2026. So that is some key guidance that has come out recently. Kind of moving forward, the Finance Committee has met a couple times on this. We continue to work on developing a spend plan. At this point, we're not ready to communicate that spend plan to the full board. But if there's any thoughts, any ideas that come to mind to the board on some potential investments of this funding, please advise Supervisor McDaniel and Supervisor Lewis. With that, I'll go ahead and transition to the line chart. The biggest factor there, so as I've mentioned in previous meetings, that line chart is based on 3 years of data. So it's a 3-year look back. And so what you see has occurred in June is that it's a big spike in revenue. And what has happened is that last year, the board extended real estate right to like June 22nd. And so there was like $500,000 in real estate taxes that was collected May of 2020. Well, this year we had about $5.5 million. So that's why you see that big spike on that revenue line chart. With that, we will benefit from the CARES Act money that we transferred from the CARES Act fund to the general fund to support public safety, both in FY20, well, in FY21. We also did it in 2020 as well. If there's no questions on that line chart, I'll go ahead and transition to the appropriation resolution. You can see that the top 3 are related to fire rescue. And so that goes back to earlier this fiscal year where the board approved using some additional reserves to fund an increase in the pay per call, right, from 7 to 10. And then due to COVID-19 restrictions over the summer of last year, they decided to give an additional allotment to fire rescue agencies. And so those are the top 3 that you see. And the bottom set has to do with what I've mentioned over the last couple months. We anticipate FEMA money to come in to reimburse us for the clinics that have been run out of the old People's building. So with that, there's approximately 585 bills that are being paid this month. I took some notes on that bills list, so if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer it. If not, my recommendation is to approve the payment of bills and the appropriation resolution as well.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation from Mr. Bolster. Are there any questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the payment of bills and the appropriation resolution?
So moved.
Motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Ms. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Bolster.
You're welcome. And I've got the next 2. So Next one is the school appropriation. And so they've got some additional new grant money that is being requested to appropriate on the school fund side. And then they also have some National Forest Reserve Fund money that has come in unanticipated as additional revenue. And they are requesting to appropriate that into their school cafeteria fund. And so that information is included in the resolution. So if there's no questions, the recommendation is to approve the resolution.
Any questions on the school division appropriation resolution? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
And a second. Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
And the next one that's on my agenda to communicate is the consideration of delivery of petroleum products for next fiscal year. And so we issued an invitation for bid on May 13th. We posted it both to the county and EVA websites. It was also advertised locally. Bids were due on June 3rd at 2 o'clock, and we received 3 bids. And so we have evaluated what was submitted, and we've evaluated the low responsive bids and found them to be responsible. And so what is included in the agenda packet is a bid comparison summary. So again, we only had 3 that submitted, and there's a 2022 fuel delivery bid award resolution that's included in your packet. And so what staff is asking, if you're in agreement with the low bid and responsiveness, to adopt the attached resolution and direct staff to move forward.
Okay, now the attached resolution has been an updated resolution
Yes,
since
and
the first one that came out?
Right. So if you're looking at page 2, I had made the mistake of actually looking at one of the bids and put that information on there. So that's been updated to $2 and 2.4290. Previously, I believe, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think it was like 2.69.
Right. So the resolution that we're looking at on board docs is correct.
That's
Resolution.
correct and up to date one.
Okay. All right, you've heard the recommendation.
Is there a reason? I mean, I realize that the off-road diesel, the Natural Bridge and Fairfield, that was the one bid that came into a different vendor. Is it not easier for us to just deal with one vendor versus 2, or we have to lowest bid?
So we've done this. I know this is something that we don't like to hear, but we've done this process for a number of years. And historically, there's not been an issue when you've had, say, the same type of product being delivered to 2 different locations by 2 different vendors. So that doesn't really answer the question, but it's been the process that we've done, and it's not been, like I said, it's not been an issue in the past for us as the buyer.
Was it discussed any at all, the difference between the off-road diesel that was provided to fleet services and why the price was different to Natural Bridge and Fairfield?
I did not reach out to the vendor. Each one submits their bid independently of each other, so I don't.
I'm just wondering what the difference would have been. I mean, it seems like the same product, just going to a different location.
Yeah, so each supplier goes to potentially a different location to source the fuel when they do their rack price. And so it appears on bid number 5 that, the rack prices are obviously different. And then each supplier has an opportunity to build in their transportation cost and their profit cost into their bid. And it just happens that in this case, for bid number 5, Quarles was less than Holtzman Oil Corporation.
Because it doesn't talk about volume here, it's just talking about.
Right. So in
Correct.
the bid document, the invitation for bid, it does provide an estimate on what we anticipate to be how much is going to be requested in FY22.
So the prices could vary depending on volume. Correct? Is that
Well,
one-
it'll change. This is not a we don't set this like in stone as far as this is going to be the amount through the whole year. It's just that at this point in time, everyone pulled their rack prices on the same date. So as prices go up or down throughout the fiscal year, we'll either benefit when prices go down, or it'll potentially have an impact on the budget if prices go up. Again, I know we don't always like to hear it, but this is historically how we have done this, this process for fuel.
And you support this process, right?
Yeah,
This is the
yeah.
best process. Okay.
Any other questions? Or do we have a motion on the petroleum delivery bid?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? And a second. Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Day? Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll ask for Mr. Suter. He's going to present the Maury committee request for scenic river designation. And he's joining us by Zoom. Mr. Suter?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry if it gets a little noisy. This is the quietest place I could find in a house full of folks. I'm out on the porch, so I'll just get right to it. As you all know, back in 2017, the James River was designated by the General Assembly as a Virginia Scenic River. Following that, in 2019, the Upper Maury River from the confluence of the Calf Pasture and Little Calf Pasture rivers downstream to the Furs Mill Bridge at Beans Bottom received the same designation. As required by the state's process, both efforts were supported by the Board of Supervisors after being initiated by interested citizen groups. In the case of the Upper Maury, a group known as the Scenic Maury Committee shepherded the process. And after working with the board to guide it through passage of legislation, the group began studying the rest of the Maury from Beans Bottom downstream about 23 miles to its confluence with the James River in Glasgow. The existing and proposed stretch of the river shown on the maps, the map attached in your agenda package. And understanding the need for public input, the group made a significant coordinated effort to contact landowners along the entire stretch on this lower stretch, just like they did the upper. The goal was to ensure universal understanding of what the Virginia Scenic River designation does do, and more importantly, really what it does not do, such as limit landowner rights. I've included links to that information in your package, and the group has now come to the next step in the process, which is to request support from you, the board, as described in the memorandum in your board package. The memorandum does include several letters of support. We've also received oral support from several businesses. Mohawk in particular, as a large business, was interested, and local managers have recommended support to their corporate level. If the board does support this, the next step would be to issue a letter of request to the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, to study the 23-mile stretch to officially study and document qualification for the program. This involves both office and on-site reviews. That process would likely be completed by mid-fall, after which we'd receive a report of qualification. And then the last step for the board would be then to officially request that Senator Deeds and Delegate Campbell sponsor legislation as they have in the past for consideration in the 2022 General Assembly legislative session. The city councils of Lexington and Buena Vista, as well as Glasgow Town Council, are taking this up. Glasgow has already expressed support, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Also, I will note that Supervisors Day and McDaniel were also part of this discussion with the committee. If you're in support, all you need to do is vote to direct me to send a letter requesting DCR study the river segment. Sorry for the barking dogs.
Any questions for Mr. Suter? Hearing none, do we have a motion that we want to have Mr. Suter send the letter of request?
Yes. So moved.
All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? And a second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Ayers,
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yeah.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yeah.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Suter.
Thank you all very much. Unless you need me further, I'm going to go ahead and step off here. I think we've got some dinner reservations.
Okay.
Enjoy your vacation.
I hope you all have a great week.
Consideration of Balloons Over Rockbridge application for an outdoor event.
Thank you. Miss Beth Armstrong with the Balloons of Rockbridge has submitted the following application for outdoor events in order to hold the annual event at the Oak Hill property at the Virginia Horse Center. As described in the schedule of events that was included in your package, the majority of the events will be held on July 2nd and July 3rd, with additional balloon rides on the morning of July 4th. So this will be the 5th year, I believe, that of the Balloons Over Rockbridge at the Horse Center property, with last year being canceled due to the pandemic. I would like to now turn the floor over to Ms. Armstrong to review the details of the event itself. With that, Ms. Beth Armstrong.
This is actually our 4th festival. Our nonprofit has been in existence 4 or 5 years, but unfortunately we were not allowed to have the festival last year. This year we have scheduled July 2nd and 3rd events from 2 to 9:30 in the afternoon, and a flight on Sunday morning, July 4th. We'll have piloted flights, tethered balloon rides, live music, food, local craft vendors, children's activities, and we are happy that we have been able and still are able this year to offer this event free of charge. There's no admission, no parking fees. And we do use the event every year to showcase a couple of nonprofits in the area. This year, our profits are going to go to Cats Unlimited, Rockbridge Animal Alliance, Team RWB Veterans Group, the Rockbridge JCs, and Straight Street. Is there any other questions or anything you have for me?
No, we appreciate you making all this work.
With that, if the board is in agreement, we would approve the application for the outdoor event.
Okay, and that is your recommendation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a recommendation, Mr. Slade. We have a motion to support it. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
One second.
And a second. Any discussion? Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Now we're going to have the Route 11 pedestrian study presentation.
Yes.
Slade?
Bear with me here. I'm going to actually share my screen if I'm able. All right. At the December 14th, 2020 Board of Supervisors meeting, Ms. Ann Cundy, Director of Transportation with the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission, and Mr. Zach Beard, Transportation Planner with the CDC, presented an overview of the Route 11 pedestrian study. The need for additional pedestrian access was discussed at the November 13th, 2019 Joint Planning Commission meeting with the City of Lexington Planning Commission, Rockbridge County Planning Commission. The 2 areas that we discussed at that meeting were the East Lexington area and the East Midland Trail area. On the North Lee Highway, the current sidewalk terminates at the College Square Shopping Center. The Route 11 area was chosen for the rural transportation small area study for FY 2021. The cost associated with the Route 11 pedestrian study was paid for by VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation, Rural Transportation Planning Assistance Funds. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ms. Ann Cundy and Mr. Zach Beard in attendance this evening to present the final report of the Route 11 pedestrian study that was completed in May of this year. Mr. Zach Beard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sladen.
minimize this. Right, good evening, members of the board. My name is Zach Beard. I'm a transportation planner with the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. Really excited to be here to present the final draft and recommendations of the Route 11 pedestrian study in Rockbridge County. Also equally as excited to be here in person since it's been a while since any of us have really done this. So I'm going to first just kind of provide an overview of the final draft, project evaluation process, the recommendations that we kind of settled on, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ann Cundy, and she will kind of go through some of the grant funding options for some of these potential projects that we identified. So before we dive right in, I just want to, kind of reiterate the background that Mr. Slayton was mentioning earlier, just to refresh everyone's memory. Just move this stuff out of the way here so everyone can see. So as Mr. Slayton was saying, this study kind of originated from observations of county staff and also VDOT, noticing that there were people walking near this corridor around Route 11 from Lexington all the way to that Walmart shopping center, coming from nearby residential areas, the high school, BMI, etc. Also commercial destinations such as the hotels. And they were walking in places where basically pedestrian facilities are more or less non-existent. So the main purpose of this report is kind of threefold. First, we wanted to identify pedestrian needs in this area. Basically, where are people walking from and where are they walking to? Second, evaluate what are the pedestrian improvements that could be made, whether sidewalks or crosswalks. Third, just offer a set of recommendations that could be used to inform local decision-making, whether it be for future grant funding or also planning level consideration, things like the comprehensive plan or capital improvement plan. So to accomplish all this, we formed a study group with the folks that you see on the screen. We had Rockbridge County, City of Lexington, BMI, VDOT, and the PDC all represented for this study group to kind of help guide and move this thing forward. So we presented the scope back to the county board in December. We've held 2 study group meetings in January and February. We submitted the final draft of this report last month to county staff. So the final report looks at existing conditions, needs, potential projects, the project evaluation results, and recommendations and conclusions. So looking at the study area, the map on your screen, I believe you can see that there. If you focus on the yellow part, kind of going down Route 11. But that was basically a 1-mile study area that goes from Route 11 from Furs Mill Road north to College Square Shopping Center, north to Greenhouse Road, across I-64, and then ending at that Walmart Shopping Center. We also looked at the 5 signalized intersections that are along this 1-mile corridor. And that's just important to note that we weren't just looking at sidewalk improvements that could be made just north and south along that Route 11 corridor, but also looking at places in the study area that were the best places where folks could cross. So we also looked at several adjacent roads to include Greenhouse Road, Maury River Road, and Thoroughbred Circle. So sections of Route 11 have, within the study area, there's actually one segment that has the highest traffic volume out of the entire county. And the study area just kind of in general is characterized by a high number of commercial entrances, traffic speeds typically around 45 miles an hour, and total crossing road width of 80 to 100 feet. So this image right here is an intersection of Greenhouse Road, just illustrating the challenges of walking the corridor if you're a pedestrian and trying to cross at any point. If you're looking kind of north to south, there are a lot of entrances to navigate. And if you're trying to cross the road, you could be at times crossing up to 6 lanes of traffic. Our existing conditions analysis was trying to answer the questions of, again, where are people walking from, where are they walking to, and where are the best places to establish pedestrian facilities. Based on the data and study group input, we found kind of 3 general kind of overarching things and takeaways from these existing conditions and all the data that we analyzed. Walmart Shopping Center was the top destination to walk to in this corridor. Most trips originate from the city, or Greenhouse Road, or Maury River Road. And most people were walking on the west side of Route 11 versus the east side. So we identified 9 different segments and 5 different crossing points. You can see here them numbered here on the map, kind of starting at the bottom of this map and going up. So you can see 1, 2, 3, going Greenhouse Road 4, 5. Segment 6 is going across the interstate, 7, 8, 9. So we had 9 different segments that we identified. Segments that begin or end at those signalized intersections, including the crossing improvements, were included in the project as well. All sidewalks are 6 feet wide with the exception of Project 4. So Project 4 is that project from the intersection of Route 11 and Greenhouse Road going past the high school. That project includes both an asphalt shared use path and 6-foot sidewalks. The segment location was based on kind of 3 main things. So whether a project had a logical beginning and end point, and whether it connected to a point of interest. You're really trying to identify segments that were about 1/4 of a mile long. So this is not only the distance that most pedestrians are willing to walk from point A to point B, but this also just kind of helped moderate the cost and make sure these projects and segments weren't too large. And finally, kind of again, we were really trying to locate a lot of these segments on the west side of Route 11. So segment 6, that's the segment that goes basically Greenhouse Road over to Maury River Road across the interstate. And segment 7, which is from Maury River Road to the Walmart Crossing Shopping Center, just really based on the study group input, feedback from VDOT, and looking at those existing site constraints. Just in particular, the kind of difficulty of trying to construct sidewalk over an interstate bridge. So segment 6 and 7, it's likely that it's not very likely that these projects could be constructed in really the near midterm. But we kept them in the study just for comparative purposes. So we also evaluated the best places to cross Route 11, since there are destinations on both sides of Route 11 that would benefit from having crossings at each signal. Just important to note that crossings are important to include in sidewalk projects because statistics show that most pedestrian crashes occur when people are trying to cross the road. So we really kind of wanted to emphasize the importance of crossings and make sure we were including them in this study as well. We polled the study group after reviewing existing conditions to establish an objective set of project evaluation criteria to determine how well each project met the area's needs. So the study group prioritized safety, demand, and equity as the 3 factors to evaluate each project. Cost was also identified as a main factor from a project feasibility standpoint, just very practical practical to, of course, make sure we are considering costs. So we developed a set of metrics based on these priorities. So for instance, safety, we looked at roadway width, speed, traffic volume, number of lanes, et cetera. So based on these metrics, we generated kind of 3 scores for each one of the projects. So the first set of scores evaluated each project on how well they met safety, demand, and equity factors. So looking at the map, the green segments scored the best. So these segments addressed safety, demand, and equity the best out of the 9 segments in our study. See segments 2, 3, and 6 were the best. Segments 5, 8, and 9, they're in the red. Typically, these segments score lower just because they weren't providing kind of the access to points of interest, weren't kind of connecting, kind of key points in this study area. So that's also, they weren't located on Route 11, and segments on Route 11 typically addressed safety needs better than kind of these segments that were, off the main Route 11 corridor. The second scoring criteria was looking at planning level cost estimates. So these cost estimates are just emphasize planning level. So this is just kind of to give us a general idea of how much they will cost. So we look at things like project segment length, right of way, utilities. So of the 9 project segment cost estimates, 5 projects cost less than $1 million. Those projects are highlighted in green. 3 projects cost between 1 and 1.2 million. Those are in yellow. And then the most expensive project was segment 6, which is going across the interstate bridge. Typically, the most significant factor contributing to the price is distance, whether a project needs curb and gutter, and whether a project included a signalized crossing. So the final score that we use to evaluate each one of these projects, we basically take the safety, demand, and equity factors from that first set of scores. Then we take the cost and we kind of generate a score for each one of those. And so basically divide the benefits score by the cost and kind of come up with where we're combining both together. So based on that, the highest scoring project was College Square to Greenhouse Road on the west side of Route 11. It had a very high benefit score. The cost was kind of about average. I think with all 9 of these projects, when you average out the cost, the average cost was about $1 million. So it was kind of mid-range as far as the cost, but it had a very high benefit score. Kind of conversely, if you look down the list there, the second to last, the highest score to Greenhouse Village segment, while it had a pretty low cost in comparison, it had a very low benefit score. So that's why that scored. So I know this is hard to see, but I just wanted to include this as an example. So each project that we identified has a detailed summary sheet located in the appendix of the report. So if you'd like to find out more about each one of these projects, you can flip to the back of this report and kind of really, zoom in and get some detail on some of these projects. So the study recommends 5 strategies for improving pedestrian connectivity along the corridor. I'm going to highlight just the first 2 since they're probably the most significant. So while we really had the goal, we wanted to establish a continuous pedestrian connection from the city of Lexington all the way across the bridge to Walmart. However, just kind of those site constraints really trying to get across the bridge in I-64 prohibits that really anytime soon. So as a result, recommendation 1 is kind of touching on, it suggests that the county should consider focusing efforts in developing projects south of the I-64 interchange, in particular projects 2, 3, and 4. All 3 of those had very high benefit scores, meaning they address things like safety, demand, and equity well. They had decent cost estimates. Also, developing all 3 of these projects really would create the potential to provide a continuous pedestrian connection from the city to the high school. So it's not to Walmart, but it is to the high school and connecting to a very important part of this area. Recommendation 2 suggests that each project also include a signalized pedestrian crossing based really in a lot of research indicating that the majority of pedestrian fatalities occur when crossing the road. And crashes are less frequent at formalized intersections. So in particular, the Greenhouse Road intersection should be a priority for future pedestrian crossing due to there's 6 lanes crossing approximately 100 feet of roadway, has the highest traffic volume in the county, the highest number of vehicular crashes at that intersection within the study area, amongst other reasons. So this slide just highlights those 3 projects, 2, 3, and 4. They're circled in the yellow that we are recommending. So costs, for each project could be reduced depending on the phasing of intersection crossings. Project 2, it's more expensive, would connect to the existing sidewalk on the east side of Route 11 and provide a continuous connection from the city to Greenhouse Road. Project 3 does not connect to an existing sidewalk. So project 1 right below it would be required to establish that continuous pedestrian connection on the west side of Route 11 and connect with Greenhouse Road. However, that would be a combined $2 million project if you combine both projects 1 and 3. So making project 2 the more feasible option, albeit less favorable because it's on the east side of the road. Project 4, going from Route 11 to the high school, has actually the lowest cost per mile of any project. It may be the most feasible from a cost standpoint, but it would fail to provide that connection to the city. Ultimately, all of that really means that the county will need to kind of weigh the options and determine what's most important. Is it establishing connectivity to an existing sidewalk and constructing sidewalk on the west side of the road in relation to costs, and how to spread out the cost through phasing over time. So there's a lot of things to consider. So just in summary, we evaluated 9 different segments, 5 different intersections. Each of these are profiled in detail in the report. This study is really intended to inform the county's decision-making regarding future pedestrian projects and providing an overview of project benefits versus project costs. So before I hand it off to Anne, where she's going to discuss some of the potential funding opportunities for some of the projects that were identified in the report, are there any questions about the process, how we evaluated the projects, any questions about projects along the study corridor in particular?
Do you have any count of how many pedestrians we have using that on a daily basis?
We did a Infield site visit, I guess in late October of last year. We were set up on both sides of the interstate. And this was during COVID. I don't think the high school was either in limited hours or I know there were businesses around that had limited hours. So the counts weren't very high. I think we, for an entire day, we had 15 folks that we documented along the corridor. But we also used something called Streetlight, which is this big data software that collects basically pedestrian counts through smartphone data. And that's something that we use to supplement our prioritization with and kind of determining where people are walking to and from. So I guess to get more data would really be needed to really make a more robust kind of, count of how many people are walking this corridor at all times of day and all seasons and all times of the year.
But we wouldn't, I mean, you wouldn't, on a lot of these segments, there's no sidewalk, so you wouldn't be walking. I mean, the idea is to encourage walking, to allow a pathway where there currently is none, right? Where people want to walk, but they can't.
Yeah, and there could be a lot of latent demand because there are, a lot of points of interest in the corridor, and there's a lot of residential areas kind of surrounding and adjacent to the study area, multifamily housing, and also I think new development going in Thoroughbred Circle. Actually talking to, I believe she's a realtor that was in the study group, was mentioning that multiple people had expressed interest in walking from the Thoroughbred Circle area down to the Chessie Trail. And that's actually an important component of this that I actually failed to mention was the Chessie Trail and how much that always came up as, so not just connecting to the city of Lexington, but connecting to the Chessie Trail. We heard from a lot of our study group members, and also when we were out that day, we actually interviewed 9 different individuals, from a state trooper to several folks working in the hotels and local businesses, asking them their observations of, how many people do you see walking on a daily basis? And time and again, we just heard, whether it be VMI students or high school students or people from the residential areas, kind of trying to get to the Chessie Trail, or kind of expressing that they wish there was a better way to get to the Chessie Trail. So just wanted to highlight that as well.
Would this incorporate bikes? I mean, when you say pedestrian, would this be also help our bikers? Or
as of right now, yeah, it was just a pedestrian focused study, so there was no bike lanes.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Lyons, members of the board, Ann Cundy, thanks. I'm gonna shift gears here and talk a little bit about how the county might get some of these projects funded. The first program I'm going to talk about is Transportation Alternatives, or TAP. This is a PDOT program. They receive federal funds for transportation alternatives, which they then allocate. Our Commonwealth Transportation Board member ultimately decides which TAP projects or which TAP grant awards are made on a 2-year cycle. So we are currently in a TAP cycle that happens on odd years. It alternates with Smart Scale. The TAP program provides 80% federal share on a project with 20% local match. That can be local cash or third-party match. And again, projects are programmed in years 1 and 2 of VDOT's 6-year improvement program. And that is really one of the best things about TAP, in addition to that 80% federal match. Right now, if you get a project funded through revenue sharing or Smart Scale, those projects are being programmed in the last 2 years of the 6-year plan. But if a the TAP project gets funded, you know that you're going to be able to begin your preliminary engineering phase about 18 months later, once the CTB has approved that project and your agreement with VDOT is in place. So what's what we like about TAP? So as an example, Zach talked about the fact that a lot of the projects in this plan and along this corridor average about $1 million. So that's what we've used here as an example. So 80%, $800,000, $200,000 coming from local match. TAP works on a reimbursement basis. So the local sponsor, in this case, Rockbridge County, would incur costs and pay, for instance, the consultant doing the preliminary engineering work, and then submit for reimbursement to VDOT. That can be done as frequently as monthly during that program phase. So the timeline for a project that, as an example, if you were to submit a project in this round that is open right now, the deadline for the final application is October 1st. The deadline for the required pre-application is actually July 1, in just a couple of weeks. But what we're suggesting here is that for $1 million project, the county would actually phase that and make one application in one cycle for funding just to cover the PE, or preliminary engineering, and right-of-way phases. You would get the project underway, and then in the subsequent round in 2023, make application again for the construction funding. And that allows your CTB member, Mark Merrill, to spread his dollars around and make sure that he can fund all the applications in the Stanton Construction District. So $1 million is a lot for one project and one round of TAP, but there's good precedent with other localities in our region for phasing that project in. And then, of course, that also allows the county to spread that local match commitment out across several fiscal years and several budget cycles. So that's what we're illustrating in the table below, is that your local match is coming in phases, and really the bulk of it doesn't hit until the end of the project when you're actually under construction and you're paying that contractor as their tickets come in. Maybe I'll pause here and take any questions about the TAP program, the scheduling, or how the funding works.
Questions?
Okay. So the other funding option for this project would be Smart Scale. I'm going to skip revenue sharing, but if you want me to talk about that after Smart Scale, I can do that too. Smart Scale is Virginia's sort of signature funding program at this point. It funds transit projects, new road constructions, widenings, access management, bike and ped. It essentially will fund anything. And the beauty of Smart Scale is that up to 100% of the project cost can be covered. Rockbridge County currently has a Smart Scale project in development for the improvements at Exit 205 at Rafine that came through in the first round of Smart Scale.
It was when they renamed it.
Okay, so technically the second, but an early success. That one was particularly successful because the county actually had some of its own funding to contribute, and that Zach was talking about benefit cost scores. Smart Scale uses that methodology as well. However, you can apply for 100% of the cost of the project. As I alluded to earlier, the downside of Smart Scale is that if you make application in calendar year 2022, then that project could be approved following June for the FY24 6-year improvement program. And then the money for just engineering wouldn't start flowing until about 2028. So best case scenario, your sidewalk is built in 2030. It's just how it works. and it's how everybody has to sit tight and wait for these projects. Seems like a long time to wait for a sidewalk, but oftentimes transportation projects can take twice that amount of time. So it's great that projects in Smart Scale are fully funded, beginning to end, and you know they're going to be built. So I included this map that shows the different areas of the state in terms of how your projects score in Smart Scale. So Rockbridge County is part of Category D, which is just the most rural part of the state. I sort of hate that it has that association with grades, but it's just that we're the most rural. And depending on where you are in the state, your project is scored on these 5 or 6 factors. Land use only applies to the areas in red. But the critical thing here to think about is, will this project score well on the economic development and safety factors? And then, of course, what's the cost? So it's always benefit divided by cost. Economic development refers to whether that project is going to serve imminent economic development. So if you've had a parcel develop and your certificate of occupancy has just been issued, it won't count. So it has to be something that is in the pipeline, but at a pretty good level of development. You, the board, are about to approve it, or the site plan is approved and they are working on their plans, but they haven't broken ground yet. So that's where you're going to get a lot of points on a project like this in Smart Scale. Safety would have to do with the likelihood that the project would reduce the number of crashes occurring in the corridor over the last 5 years. And fortunately, there is no pedestrian crash history right now. As Ms. Ayers was saying, there's not a lot of people walking in this corridor because there aren't facilities. So we're very thankful, of course, that there have not been any pedestrians struck. However, the downside of that is that it's not going to score as well from a safety standpoint, which is difficult because it's a safety project. So that's Smart Scale. So they both have their pluses and minuses. The PDC specializes in writing grants, among other, and doing studies. So we are available to assist the county with developing any kind of transportation application that the board may decide they wish to submit. I can also answer questions about Smart Scale.
Any questions?
What does it take to have a bike, opening this, a bike lane? Because connecting that part of, I would think, would be great advantage to having a bike lane. Am I wrong there? Was there a reason that that was not included in your assessment?
We scoped developing a pedestrian network primarily because more people walk than bike. That is not to say that you could not submit a project to TAP or Smart Scale that was both curb gutter sidewalk and a bike lane. That would definitely involve additional conversations with VDOT to assure that adequate space was available. I mean, there's a lot of median
Maybe
space.
that's the answer, that if VDOT would say that there's really not space for that, and you've already kind of marked that off.
There's enough space to convert gravel shoulder into a curb gutter sidewalk section for that sidewalk. I would imagine, just sort of off the cuff, thinking about those 11-foot lanes, that to carve out a 5-foot bike lane would involve just a little bit of reconfiguration of that physical space. I mean, the median is probably wide enough that you could size it down a little bit, but again, it is a VDOT facility, so any discussion of changing that arrangement of lanes and median would be a further. But in developing a TAP application or a Smart Scale application, it's always done, in close conversations with VDOT. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your report, Chris.
Yes, just per the agenda item, I'm actually going to stop sharing this for a second, get it back on the video. Just per the agenda item, the next steps would be considering including the projects in the next comprehensive plan and consider including the projects in the capital improvement plan. Per the agenda item, the recommendations review the information, the consensus of the board, accept, certainly not approving or setting aside any funds, but accept the plan and add the plan for consideration of the next comprehensive plan.
Okay. So you've heard the recommendation. Do we have a motion to accept the plan for future consideration?
So accepting the plan for future, that's just accepting the plan for future
Just
consideration.
accepting,
Yes, we'll
yeah.
so move.
So we have a motion to do that. We have a second.
I'll second. The only thing I would like for the county to reach out to the city and BMI and WM, because anything that is done through there is going to benefit them. It may be a cost share.
So once we accept the plan, then we can share it with whoever we like, correct?
That's correct. And both the city of Lexington and BMI were included in the study group as well. So we could certainly piggyback off that recommendation. Yes, sir.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Did I hear it discuss something about the 60 East?
Yes, so in November of 19, the Planning Commission, Rockbridge County Planning Commission, and the City of Lexington Planning Commission held a joint meeting. We do that once every 2 to 3 years. And the large majority of the discussion at that November 19 meeting was pedestrian access from the city to the county and from the county to the city. And the two areas that we talked about was one, this area that we discussed tonight, and the second one was between the existing sidewalk that terminates at the KFC Walker Street and extending that to the Stonewall Square Shopping Center. And so that particular one was definitely discussed. That is a much smaller segment, but that was not included in the the Route 11 small area study, obviously. But that was discussed at the Joint Planning Commission meeting. That's smaller segment.
Anything else? All right, so we have a motion and a second. Ms. Ayers,
Yes,
Mr. McDaniel,
Yeah.
Mr. Day,
Yeah.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you, Chris. All right, we now have appointments. The CSPDC, Mr. Sladen term expires, but I understand he's willing to continue. So if there's no objections, I entertain a motion to approve. We have a second. Motion and a second. Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Day? Ms. Ayers? And the
yes.
chair votes yes. For consideration, the library board, term expires, Mr. Haran term expires on 6/30. We don't have any applicants currently, so hopefully by the next meeting we will. So if you know anybody that is interested, please encourage them to fill out an application. The Dabney board, Mr. Ford, his term expires on 6/30 and he has expressed a desire to continue. We have no other applicants. If there's no objection, I'd entertain a motion to approve Mr. Ford. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel? Ms. Ayers?
Yes,
And the chair votes yes. The next three, I'd like the board to think about before the next meeting. As you know, Raro is in the middle of trying to hire an executive director. I think if we change board members now, then that kind of sets that back. We cannot, correct me if I'm wrong, according to legal advice, we cannot just say, okay, we'll wait till after the selection of the executive director to make an appointment. So we either have to appoint new people to start working on July 1st, or we need to reappoint the current people.
well, often there are several months that people go on past their term until we find other representation. We have done that many times.
Most of
correct?
those are not joint committees, though. Ms. Huffman has reviewed,
Every one of them has a different.
right, has reviewed, so,
But didn't, I mean, at our meeting, and did you not like what we decided? When we decided to prolong that until after the executive director might understand that we did something wrong there, we should not.
that we can't do that according to the bylaw.
The RARO's bylaws.
Right.
At a
I
meeting,
don't know what,
okay,
what you're
at
talking
a
about.
meeting, we made a decision to extend that until after those appointments, until after. We made a decision here to do that several meetings ago, and
I wasn't attuned to that, but I was asked if that could be done, and I don't think it can. The appointments are made for a term, and the term is up, that service expires.
We discussed it and Ms. Ayers made the recommendation and we all just kind of went along with it. There wasn't a vote or anything like that.
Right.
But the question that I had was, and maybe Chairman Lyons answered it, can we not, do the terms have to be for 1 year, or can we appoint or extend for 2 months to allow them time to finish up and then reappoint at that point in time?
They are 4-year terms, and that's by statute.
So you can extend, you can appoint for a shorter term.
well, there are probably two that would like to stay on, and my understanding is there's one that would not, is not planning to pass this decision.
Right, but they
So-
can resign. They don't have to stay there 4 years.
Correct.
And some have indicated they'd like to finish the process of selection.
And I've also heard from some people who might want to be considered, you know, I mean, when we're talking about four-year term, I mean, obviously it's important that the current group selects their director. I agree with that. But I'm not sure of appointing for 4 years just for that.
Well, and that's why I want you to think about it. And we'll make a decision at the next meeting. Yeah.
And it might be moved. I mean, it might be that we have chosen that.
Right. So I
So,
just didn't want to jump the gun, but I wanted you to put that in the back of your mind that we need to decide that at the next meeting. The Blue Ridge Criminal Justice Board, Mr. Suter's term is expiring and he'd like to continue. There's no objection.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
second?
And a second, Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayer?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. The Blue Ridge Criminal Justice Board, Mr. Moon, has agreed to continue unless there's an objection. If not, I'll entertain a motion. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second, Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Hopefully, everyone has had the opportunity to review the staff reports.
Motion to approve is presented.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second, Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Day? Chair votes yes. Are there any board comments?
Mr. Chairman, going back to the public comment that was made earlier, I know that we allow constituents to provide us documentation to our clerk, and then they're dispersed among all board members. And certainly, I think on our website, maybe we should just expand upon that, that's an option, and that, you know, obviously our contact information is out there for constituents to contact us with any concerns they have at any time, even prior to meetings. And but certainly if they have documentation and it's something near and dear to their heart, they should provide that information as quickly as they can to us. They don't have to wait to a meeting to do so. And it
Right.
does get dispersed to all of us.
Right, and it is public comments. It's not public
Right.
questions and answers, so. Any other board comments?
I have the tourism update. Thank you.
Okay.
Rockbridge Regional Tourism has published 10,000 copies of the new visitor guide, and the guide is being distributed to market to attractions, restaurants, retail, lodging, and other highly visited locations to assist travelers during their visit. Additionally, the guide will be distributed in Virginia Welcome Centers and other visitor centers statewide. Editorial content promotes regional travel, highlighted by lead stories, etc. This content features 30 stops along Route 11, the Wilderness Road, and a side trip to Buena Vista. 10,000 copies of the Inspiration Guide will be published in July. That guide will feature full-length stories and photo spreads to inspire prospective visitors to convert into actual visitors who generate revenue, boosting the local economy. Both publications feature new photography and recent Natural Bridge State Park accomplishments, the International Dark Sky Park designation, and the Virginia Green Travel Award for Children's Discovery Area. Tourism has also approved their budget F22, and they have also voted on almost $9,000 in grants to 10 different organizations, and grants ranged from $400 to $1,600. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. This time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Right.
And a second,
Second?
Mr. Day, Ms. Ayers,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
The chair votes yes, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Meeting Zoom?
No Zoom. We're going to let more of the board.
I've heard people.
All right,
talk.
that, guess that's why I got this.
All right.
I understand.
And I don't.
Okay.
I mean,